This program is based on true events. Certain scenes and dialogue have been dramatized, and it may even cause nightmares. I'm Todd Robbins, and all my life I've been fascinated with stories so strange, so dark, so twisted. They couldn't possibly be true. I have 3 of them for you.
I want to report a murder.
The lack of sleep and the nightmare it brings. A strange ritual unsettling to the living and the dead.
It's supposed to be a place of peace.
And a dark secret that brought death and more death. But rest assured, the stories you're about to see actually happened.
And we are so sorry for your loss.
I guess they're nightmares that have already come true.
Who did this to you?
They say that nothing good happens after 1 a.m., and here it is 4:45, the time usually reserved for sleep. A good night's sleep is like a reset button. But take away sleep, and life can take an ugly turn. Here in this police station, a place that never sleeps, the officers had thought they had seen it all. That is, until Ken Parks walked in.
Can I help you?
I want to report a murder.
Excuse me?
I want to report a murder.
Control, I need a 1078 at the duty desk. So I'm going to need you to back away from the desk.
I want to report a murder.
To everyone who knew him, Ken Parks didn't seem like the kind of guy who would end up in a police station in the middle of the night reporting a murder.
Ken and Karen appeared to be a normal young couple, new home, living in the suburbs of Toronto.
But recently, Ken was withdrawn and distracted.
I'm sorry. I didn't sleep awake last night. I just need coffee.
And it didn't go unnoticed by his wife, Karen.
Ken, is there something going on?
I'm dealing with some things at work. But I've got them under control.
Ken's boss saw the changes in him as well.
Ken! 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 Oh, geez, sorry, Bill. I didn't hear you.
I was just in your office. Are you forgetting something?
Something tells me that I am, and that you know what it is.
Yeah, I do. It's your projections for the Boston account. You remember those? Projections, accounts, also known as your job?
Yep, got it. Just slipped my mind. Boston. It's coming soon. I promise.
I hope so, Ken. I really hope so. You've been making a lot of mistakes lately. Is everything all right?
Yeah. Just dealing with some things at home.
I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything we can do to help?
Thanks. I've got it under control.
Saying one thing to your boss, another thing to your wife. What's really going on here? The answer to that can be found where Ken disappears to every evening after work.
All right, shooters up.
All right, guys.
10, do it. Place your bets.
Everything. Hard 10. All of it.
Okay, shooter is up.
He did have a gambling problem, for sure. He began to lose money, and he thought the way to get back the money that he had lost was to keep gambling, to get the big win.
like this every night for the last few weeks. So much money, in fact, he's practically emptied his bank account. Ken, like so many gamblers, had a hunch. That hunch was that his luck was about to change. And you know what? He was right. His luck did change. It got worse. Trouble at work, gambling losses, a mortgage, bills and other financial obligations. It's enough to keep any man up at night. By day, he was struggling to keep up with his work. By night, there were losses at the casino, followed by regret, worry, and insomnia. Night after sleepless night starts to really take a toll on Ken.
If you have sustained, nearly total sleep deprivation, it can lead to a psychotic condition. People just lose their mind.
So, we're trying to get this kitchen renovation finished.
Soon, even his friends and in-laws start to notice that something is wrong with Ken. How could they not?
Hey, Ken, you better flip that one. It's going to burn. Ken?
Kenny, I was going to say, you better flip that burn.
Yeah. Thanks.
Ken Parks had a very normal life. He was very close to his in-laws. All was going very well in his life until he developed a gambling problem.
Honey, is Ken okay? He seems a little off. He's been under a huge stress at work and hasn't been sleeping much, to be honest with you. Last week, I found him walking around the living room at like 3 o'clock in the morning. He was sleepwalking or something.
Ken never tells anyone about his financial troubles, not even his own wife. Instead, he looked for a way to erase his gambling debts without anyone finding out just how far down he'd gone.
$7 grand for Clarendon Limited. I never heard of these guys before.
Vendors. Gotta pay them, Mona.
You know, this is the third check I've written to cash this month.
I guess it is. Boss man said he wanted it delivered today, too. Can't say why.
Okay.
That's the plan. Steal money from work, gamble with it, win, pay off debts, and then replace the money into the company account before anyone knew it was missing. There was a problem with this plan. Actually, two problems. First, it was illegal, of course. And second, Ken was a terrible gambler. He lost all that money, and even more.
Ken had taken a little bit more than $30,000 from his employer through false invoices as a way of covering the debts.
Ken, I'm going to need you to go with these gentlemen, okay? We don't want any problems.
Hey, turn around. Place your hands behind your back. Interlace your fingers.
That had been discovered. He had lost his job, and he had been arrested for that theft.
Hey, come with me.
How could you do this? How could you lie to me? Forge checks? I mean, who are you?
I can't help myself. I don't know what's wrong with me. When I'm gambling, it feels like I don't have any problems.
How am I supposed to trust you? And my parents, what are they gonna say? God, I am so embarrassed.
I'll do whatever it takes not to lose you. But
You're gonna go to Gamblers Anonymous? And you're gonna come clean to our entire family? I am sick of covering for you. And you sleep on the couch. I barely look at you, let alone sleep next to you.
After spending a night in jail, very possibly the worst place to get a good night's sleep, Ken came home to face the music. His life was completely out of control, and now Karen was paying for it too. Ken never really did get that good night of sleep he so desperately needed. It was one restless night after another until he reached a tipping point and wasn't sleeping at all. And nothing good comes from that. All Ken needed was a good night's sleep. But no, The stress, the pressure, the lack of sleep was all too much for Ken to take anymore. This night, instead of getting a good night of rest, he was more restless than ever. Night after night, Ken Parks hadn't been getting any sleep. Embezzling money from work to support his gambling addiction had got him fired, and pretty soon his life had spun out of control. As often happens when people are out of control, they end up in a place like this, talking to a cop.
I want to report a murder.
Yeah, you said that. Where'd you get all this blood? Shot somewhere? You stabbed? Sir? Hey. Where's this murder?
301 East 3rd Street.
So I'm gonna have you come with me, all right? Look.
301 East 3rd Street. It was an address that Ken knew very well, one he'd been to many times before. When he thought of that place, he smiled. But not after this night and what had happened there.
Until Ken walked into the police station with his hands bleeding, the police were completely unaware that anything had happened.
The victim was an older woman. She was found 6 feet away from the bed and had sustained blunt force injuries to her nose, eye, and skull.
Dispatch Unit 5. One female appears to be deceased.
The woman had also been stabbed repeatedly in the chest. The fatal blow, a stab to the heart.
Sir, who did this to you?
Was a son-in-law, Ken Parks.
Ken Parks?
Sleepless Ken Parks had somehow turned into a living, walking, killing machine who stabbed his mother-in-law and nearly killed his father-in-law as well. It was a shock. This was Ken's family, people that loved him. Why would he do something like this?
I started hitting her with a tire iron.
And what did you do to your father-in-law?
I choked him, and I hit him until he stopped moving. I think.
Ken, why did you do it?
That's just it. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know. 3 very unsatisfying words when it comes to the motive of a murder. But the truth is, Ken couldn't tell the police why he so brutally attacked his in-laws. Ken Parks was charged with murder and attempted murder. And in spite of his confession and his father-in-law's eyewitness account of the attacks, Ken pleaded not guilty. It seemed so open and shut, but Ken had a very, well, strange defense. He was sleepwalking. Ken claimed he was sleepwalking when he left the house that night. He was sleepwalking on the 14-mile drive over to his in-laws' house. He was sleepwalking when he got the tire iron and knife, went into the house, and attacked two people he said he loved. Sleepwalking. That's a novel defense for a horrible crime. The funny thing is, this had all happened to Ken before. Well, not the murder, the sleepwalking.
Ken Parks came from a major sleepwalking and parasomnia family. There was a very strong genetic component in him for sleepwalking. And in fact, when he was around 11 years of age, his mother found him one night with one leg hanging out a window as he was about to jump out a 6th floor window. So he would have died if she had not intervened.
It was at that point that sleep experts were retained and consulted, and a full sleep study was done to see whether in fact he was a sleepwalker.
Ken claimed that all the stress, the gambling debts, the embezzlement, the insomnia boiled him down from being a gentle giant into a real-life killing zombie. But really, is it possible that he did all that and didn't know he was doing it? Or is this a cold-blooded killer's desperate attempt to avoid a life sentence?
Ken Parks, 5 times in the sleep lab, went from the deepest stage of sleep to wakefulness, and that's only really found in sleepwalkers. It's important to emphasize that all the positive findings in the sleep lab supporting the sleepwalking defense cannot be faked. People cannot fake anything while they're asleep.
The severe lack of sleep combined with the stress he was under, Ken's brain had gone haywire. He lost control of himself, his thoughts, his actions, everything. His lawyer said Ken should not be convicted for something he couldn't control. Interesting. But what would a jury say to such a creative defense?
Well, at trial, it was decided that Ken Parks had such an extraordinary set of factors for sleepwalking that could not be reproduced that he was let free.
Yes, Ken was allowed to leave the courtroom a free man, go home and finally get some sleep.
There was no motive. There was no motive for intentional murder, so I think the jury was left with no other conclusion than to say this was sleepwalking.
After his acquittal, Ken and Karen divorced. Eventually, he was able to regain control of himself and control of his life. There was less stress, more sleep, and less sleepwalking. But still, the question remains, how is it possible that someone could kill and be completely asleep at the same time? No one can truly say. Makes you wonder, though. But it's nothing to lose sleep over. Death is known as the long sleep. But as you will see in our next story, it doesn't mean you'll rest in peace.
There are cults, satanic in nature. They try to communicate with the dead.
A graveyard is a solemn place. A place to mourn, a place to say goodbye. A place to offer up a prayer or a small gift in remembrance. It is a place of peace, but not always. Meet Natalie and Isaac Sultanov, visiting the final resting place of their 10-year-old daughter Tatiana, whose life was tragically cut short weeks earlier.
We miss you, baby.
So does Chester. He curls up on your bed and he meows for hours.
He doesn't understand that you're gone. And neither do we. What is that?
It's a doll. With a note attached.
What does it say? Tatiana, my dear little lady, you must be so excited with Christmas so near. What kind of a person would leave these things on our Tatiana's grave?
Don't let her get to you. Let's go.
It seems that Tatiana's parents aren't the only one who have been visiting her grave to pay their respect. The note and the musical doll were the first of a string of strange messages left at this young lady's final resting place.
After the parents continued to regularly visit the gravesite, these notes kept coming in. A great number of items were left around that gravesite. Toys, flowers from other gravesites. And those notes that were left appeared to be handwritten. The handwriting was not different. It all appeared to be one individual.
The notes kept coming, but soon Tatiana's gravestalker left a message of a different kind. One far more disturbing. One that couldn't be ignored.
They came to the gravesite to find that tombstone vandalized, the gravesite desecrated. With that, they immediately went to law enforcement to seek their help.
Sadly, Tatiana's family wasn't the only one to be tormented by this heinous act. Over the next several months, detectives would receive 12 more cases just like it. One by one, the police were called to cemeteries to find more ransacked graves.
That makes 12, all in this concentrated area there.
And of great significance in the investigation was the fact that the gravesites that were disturbed were those that contained the remains of young females, ranging from the age of 3 to, I believe, the age of 15.
Okay, so what are we gonna do?
Some freak leaving notes and music boxes on a little girl's grave? That's out of my weight class.
The detectives worked many tireless nights and countless weekends, interviewing anyone possibly connected with the case. As the weeks passed, they exhausted every lead. So they looked for someone that they hoped would have a better understanding of all this. And they found the right man, Professor Anatoly Moskvin, an acropolist, a graveyard scholar.
Professor, this is Detective Fomich.
Hi, thanks so much for meeting us here. Not at all. This is supposed to be a place of peace.
Mr. Anatoly Moskvin is a recognized expert in all things to do with cemeteries.
The investigators explained their plight, the desecrated graves, the messages for the dead popping up in graveyards all over the city, in hopes Moskvin can help them shed some light on the type of person who would be capable of such sinister acts.
I've seen this before. Sometimes it's a deranged mourner who's lost someone himself, but sometimes it's something darker. This is more rare, but it's not unheard of. There are cults, satanic in nature. They try to communicate with the dead, get messages across to the other side, as it were. And it can go beyond desecration of the grave sites. Extreme cults can go so far as to desecrate the body itself. Have you discovered anything like that in your investigation so far, detectives?
They couldn't get it out of their minds. Questions needed to be answered. And for that, it required doing the unthinkable. The detectives asked Tatiana's parents permission to dig up her casket.
Let's go ahead and open it up.
Exhumed and missing bodies? Someone was so depraved as to disturb the graves of girls who had already known such tragedy in their short lives, just as Professor Moskvin had foretold. Hoping Moskvin could provide some information, police visited his home.
Hello, can I help you?
We're looking for Anatoly Moskvin.
Come on, I'll take you to him.
Turns out, Moskvin lived with his mother.
Right this way.
What's this? A middle-aged man with a life-size doll collection? No, that would be weird. What's going on here proved to be something much more demented.
Detective Fomich.
Moskvin was not only an expert on body snatching, he was a participant.
Mr. Moskvin would enter into the cemeteries at night, exhume the remains, and at his home, he would start attempts at mummification. He would then dress them in very colorful clothing, position them around tables. He would sing to them, have tea parties, celebrate holidays. He was starting to build his own family, if you will.
So the very man police enlisted to help solve the crime was the perpetrator himself. He was a demented, maniacal monster who mummified the bodies of children in a twisted attempt to bring them back to life.
Mr. Moscovin had a strong fixation for young girls. But what jumps out first to people think, oh, there's a sexual nature to this. And it was shown that that's not the case. He had a strong belief that if he was able to take them out of these graves, he would be able to bring them back to life and that they would be safe.
So, who's ready for some tea? Do you want some tea?
Moscovin turned the mummified remains into crude dolls that he collected the same way a little girl might.
Even though I've been doing this for over 40 years, this particular case caused me to go, are you kidding me? Never underestimate what human beings do to one another or what they do by themselves.
What's happening, he asked Ragnall, who arrived straight from the chamber. The mood is very good for Clyde.
The most intriguing detail in this strange and unnerving story is that the professor helped the police solve a crime that he committed. Was it a cry for help? He did end up in a mental institution. Or perhaps he wanted to get caught so that the whole world would become aware of his mummified little beauties and appreciate and love them the way he did. Moscovin is getting plenty of help these days in an institution where they don't let you play with dolls. As we grow older, we grow wiser. But in our next saga, no one got wise to what was going on until it was too late. Each day, we wake up, filled with the hope that today will be as good a day as yesterday, perhaps even better. But one day, we wake up to discover that we can't do all the things we could do the day before, and the next day we can do even less. It's called getting old. And eventually, we'll discover that we can't go it alone, that we need help. And when that happens, well, we might end up in a place like this.
Out here in the courtyard is where you'll find most of our residents on days like today.
Amy Archer was the proprietor and head caregiver at the Archer Home for Senior Citizens.
What did we say with that cough?
She looked after the many elderly patients as if they were her own family.
It's a little chilly. Why don't we get you a sweater? Frank, could you help me out, please?
One of those family members was Frank Andrews. Although he was a resident of the home, at 61, Frank was younger and healthier than the average guest and would assist Amy with the other patients. In exchange, he got a nice place to live, full of good friends, for a good price.
Frank Andrews, he was very vigorous. He did chores around the house. He embraced the opportunity to live at the Archer home.
Another member of the Archer home was the staff physician, Dr. King. He treated all the residents anytime anyone was ill or needed medical care.
Okay, sir.
Okay. What are you doing?
Mr. Cutler's cough. It seems to be getting worse.
Besides being Amy's helper, Mr. Andrews, I wasn't aware that you also possessed a medical degree.
Well, his cough is...
I'm all aware of Mr. Cutler's condition. I suggest that you keep your offers of help confined to your areas of expertise, namely the garden.
People moving into the Archer home would be provided with medical care. Dr. King was the person who came in and tried to treat them and get them back to glowing health.
Thank you, Frank. By all accounts, Amy and her staff provided competent and compassionate care for each resident. But like any old age home, dying was an unfortunate part of life.
Never gets any easier, does it, Amy? Time of death, 3:28 p.m.
In spite of Amy and Dr. King's efforts, the elderly patients would pass on, and the hearse would make routine trips from the Archer home to the morgue. But then something unexpected happened. Frank, the youngest and healthiest guest of the Archer home, awoke in the middle of the night. warning, collapsed and died face down on the bathroom floor. Fine as can be one day and then dead the next day? At 61, that's not supposed to happen. The death of Franklin Andrews took a number of folks by surprise, including his sister, Nellie. That's her there, Nellie Pierce.
Mrs. Pierce. We are so sorry for your loss.
Doctor, what happened?
Well, your brother slipped into a coma last night and never recovered. Nausea, vomiting, and it was just downhill from there. Terrible stomach pains. Stomach boils as well.
I just saw him 2 days ago. He was healthy. I don't understand.
Mrs. Pierce, we have your brother's personal papers and such, some of his books. You can send for his clothes and the rest of his things. Again, we are so sorry for your loss. I want you to know he was very well cared for here.
Losing a loved one is always hard to accept. But for Nellie, it just seemed impossible. I mean, she had just seen her brother a week before, and he was fine, and now stomach boils, coma? It just didn't add up. There's only one thing for her to do.
And he is in the best shape of any man his age, or even 10 years younger. He walked 5 miles a day, every single day. And I was with him on Saturday, 2 days ago. He was fine. Something is wrong.
Mrs. Pierce, I know you're in shock with your brother's sudden death, but, he did live in an old folks' home. And, I don't want to be callous, but, those people that live in those places, they die.
No. Something happened. I know it. I feel it. Something happened.
Mrs. Pierce, I can't go over to Archer Home just on your hunch. I'm sorry. Really, we can't help.
Mrs. Pierce, your brother, he was 61?
Yes, he was 61, and he wasn't sick a day in his life. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. Please, I'm begging you, please look into this for me.
Okay, I can't promise anything, and my partner over there is probably right. But I'll look into it for you. Nothing official, okay?
Thank you so much.
Detective Huntington took pity on Nellie and decided to hear her out. It was the least he could do for this poor, grief-stricken woman.
Hi, is Amy Archer?
I'm Amy Archer.
What did he expect to find? Oh, probably that an old man had died in a place where old men often die. But at least he could set Nellie's mind at ease.
Well, do you have an office where we might be able to talk in?
Please.
So, on Frank Andrews, what can you tell me?
Well, not much, really. Everyone liked him. I'm sorry, I'm not used to policemen being here. Is this an investigation?
No, just checking the facts. His sister said that he was healthy as a horse. What's your take on it?
Well, the fact of the matter is this was not the first time that Frank Andrews complained of stomach pain. His condition worsened and he slipped into a coma.
It's not the first time? So he'd been sick before?
Yes. The families of our patients are sometimes shocked by death. We rarely are. This is the last stop for all of our patients. They come to us already very old and sick.
But Frank Andrews wasn't old. And according to his sister, he wasn't sick.
Detective Huntington had a hunch that something wasn't adding up. So he had all the death certificates pulled from the last year at Archer Home.
Whoa. What are these?
The death certificates you requisitioned from Archer Home.
These are the death certificates for 1 year?
No. This is just from the last 6 months.
Are you kidding me?
And so at that point, they began their investigation into the death records and the comparisons between the death rates. And what they found was rather astonishing.
Hey, Jim.
What's up?
I got something on that Andrews case.
Case? There's no case here, my friend.
Yeah, well, not yet. But I went through all the death certificates, and I found it.
Certificates? Plural. What have you been doing?
Look, all right, I know what you're going to say, right? It's an old folks' home. People are supposed to be dying. Agreed. But from all heart attacks and dementia and old age. But that's not how they're dying.
All right, I'll take the bait. How are they meeting their maker at Archer Home?
Look at this. Vomiting, extreme nausea, stomach boils, death. Extreme nausea, stomach pain, boils, coma, death.
When you stare at a pattern long enough, well, eventually everything else just fades into the background. After a while, all you can see is the pattern.
Not one incident of heart attack, cancer, or anything else.
And you know what else they all have in common?
What?
There's one name on every single one of these death certificates.
That's somebody we're going to have to go see.
The Archer home was a safe place for the elderly to live out their golden years. But after the mysterious death of one of their healthier patients, the police were called to investigate. And what they uncovered seemed to point at one person.
All the death certificates of the people that passed away at Amy's home were signed by Dr. King.
If there was anything lacking or suspicious in Dr. King's documentation of the deaths at the Archer home, the local coroner or medical examiner would have noticed. But Windsor, Connecticut is a very small community. And Dr. King is not only one of the few physicians in the area and the resident doctor here, he's also the local coroner and medical examiner. That raises a few questions now, doesn't it?
Franklin Andrews?
That's Frank, but yes.
Well, nausea, vomiting, fell into a coma.
Stomach boils?
Stomach boils, yes.
You find it odd, Doc, that a lot of the patients here seem to die of stomach ailments as opposed to, say, cancer or a heart attack?
Well, Detective, I'm a doctor with a lot of old, sick patients, so no. I don't find it particularly odd. I find it just a regular part of the job. You know, much like writing parking tickets for a policeman like you.
Okay, Doc. I get the point. If we can get a copy of the autopsy results, we'll get out of your way.
There was no autopsy. I examined Andrews the way I examine all the patients who die here, but there's not an autopsy, I mean, ever. Patients who die here don't get autopsies. You know what that would cost? Now, I have a lot of sick patients to attend to, so if you two would show yourselves out.
None of the residents at the Archer home, no matter how they died, ever got an autopsy. That's another pattern. But this is one pattern that the investigators have decided to break. So the detectives order that Frank Andrews' body be exhumed. And what they find is astonishing.
The post-mortem examination conducted March 11th, I, the undersigned, find the decedent, Franklin Andrews, did expire to global organ failure.
Examining the heart, liver, and lungs, I did therein find a level of arsenic contamination and levels of arsenic components several times in excess of 0.4 parts per million, which is the baseline for arsenic poisoning.
Wow. Arsenic poisoning. Suddenly all those strange stomach ailments and comas make sense. So the detectives turn their attention back to the man responsible for the patients at Archer Home, Dr. King.
Gentlemen?
Dr. King, can we have a word with you?
Certainly.
Do you know how much you spent last year on arsenic?
Are you insinuating? I didn't buy that arsenic for myself. Why would I need it?
Well, why is your name on every single arsenic purchase order for Archer Home?
Because I'm a medical doctor. I have a license to buy it. Besides, I was told to buy it.
By whom?
By Amy Archer. She said she had a rat problem.
Amy Archer does have a rat problem, and that rat is Dr. King. He's ratting her out to the police. He told the detectives that Amy asked him to order that arsenic, and lots of it. He didn't ask questions. She said she had a good use for it. And she does. But it's not the one that the good doctor thinks it is. Turns out the great deal Amy Archer was offering residents, a clean, safe place till the end of their days for one flat price, wasn't such a great deal after all, for Amy or the residents.
Amy was running a home for the aged, and it was not a very good business model because it required turnover, and the only way Amy could do that was to expedite the demise of some of her residents, and she did that rather efficiently.
So it wasn't Dr. King after all. Kind-hearted, caring Amy Archer couldn't wait for vacancies. She had to make them. Amy had a maniacal plan to sustain her business model. She would dose her unsuspecting guests with arsenic poison. As soon as one resident died, Amy would move another unsuspecting victim right into their place, so she could repeat the pattern and keep her business alive. An investigation revealed that Amy Archer had poisoned some 60 of her own residents. Amy Archer didn't play the role of a nurturing caregiver. She played the angel of death, deciding where and when her residents would die so that she could then move in other paying customers and then kill them too, all in cold blood. Amy narrowly escaped the death penalty. Instead, she lived out the rest of her days in a mental institution. She died in her 90s. She lived a long life and died of natural causes, the one thing we all hope for, and the one thing that she denied so many residents of the Archer home. I told you all these stories were strange. And don't worry, I have plenty more. Until then, may all your nightmares come true.